It is my great pleasure to announce the Lifetime Achievement Award going to our friend and colleague, Dr. Arnold I. Caplan. Now, for all of you that know Arnie, I want you to look at his face and understand that is the face that has launched 1,000 ships, 1,000 companies, 1,000 research projects, 1,000 careers or more with the discovery of MSCs. Arnie is one outspoken guy. Having developed and created, published 500 papers about MSCs, or as he originally called them, mesenchymal stem cells, he has studied them so long and with such detail and has so much knowledge that he announced to the world that he was wrong, that they shouldn't be called stem cells. They are indeed medicinal signaling cells. That's being outspoken, and that's being a leader. I've had the great pleasure since the pandemic actually started of almost weekly calls that involved Arnie Caplan for the Alliance for Cell Therapy Now, ACT Now, which is a policy advocacy organization. I am fortunate enough to co-chair the advisory board of the group, and Arnold is an active participant. He has the wisdom of years of experience, and generally he is spot on in everything that he recommends and says. He is a mentor to so many researchers, management teams, advisory boards galore. There's no one quite like him in our world. He is almost universally respected. And for those that might not care for MSCs, they're just jealous. So I'm very pleased that he will be receiving this Lifetime Achievement Award tonight. Now, there's a special individual to introduce Dr. Caplan, and that is Scott Bruder, MD, PhD, the founder and CEO of Bruder Consulting and Venture Group. Scott has enjoyed a long and distinguished career in the discovery, development, and commercialization of products that diagnose, treat patients around the world. I want to suggest to you that there's no one better to introduce Arnie Caplan, and he gives a stellar introduction. So you'll learn just how wonderful Arnold Caplan is and how deserving he is of a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Hello, everybody. It is my distinct honor and privilege to be able to say a few words about Professor Arnold Caplan, this year's recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award. My name is Scott Bruder, and I have known Arnold since 1984. Now, I'd first like to thank the World Stem Cell Summit for recognizing Arnold and all that he has done, consistent with the mission of the summit and the organization that is a multidisciplinary approach to advancing our efforts in stem cell therapy. Now, some of you may not know Arnold's long history in science, and so I just want to spend a couple of minutes walking through that. But what you'll see is that he started his scientific career in the Institute of Technology in Illinois in 1963. He went on to get his PhD at Johns Hopkins. He did a postdoc there with Professor Heckenbrock, and then 2 postdocs at Brandeis with 2 other giants in science, Nathan Caplan and Ed Zwilling, and then moved to Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland in 1969. He has now been there 53 years. We had the joy of celebrating his 50th anniversary on campus, which in and of itself is a tremendous achievement and milestone. I had the pleasure of meeting Arnold in 1984, and as his graduate student, this was one of the first books that he gave me, and a theme that really drove much of his work for the majority of his career, and that is, you can read this comment about tissue morphogenesis and the identification that there is a population of cells here in the limb bud that are capable of differentiating into all of the other complex tissues in the fully formed limb. And that really represents a lifetime of work and opportunity and R01s and many other grants. And Arnold leveraged that to learn and to teach so many people. I had the pleasure, as I said, as being one of his graduate students, and Bernie's asked me to talk a little bit about from the context of Arnold as a mentor. And Arnold has provided a tremendous environment, not only for myself to learn, but so many others. Now, what many of you will recognize is this slide from 1990. Now, this slide, as you can see, this is one of the original versions of the slide. It was considered a hypothesis. Up here on the right, he calls it a hypothesis because the idea was that there would be this stem cell, a mesenchymal stem cell that could give rise to all of these tissues. And Arnold now talks about how we were able to force these cells down these various lineages in vitro. But the story has evolved since 1990. And in fact, we'll talk just a little bit more about those contributions that he made in that regard. So shortly after this, this concept of the mesogenic process was put forth by Arnold in this landmark paper in the Journal of Orthopedic Research in 1990, we had this idea that we would be able to harvest those cells and use them in a way that would allow for the tissue repair and reconstruction of a variety of mesenchymal origin tissues. And while this turned out to be effective, we've since learned that the reasons for that are not exactly as Arnold had put forth. He initially thought that these cells would, in the body, directly form a variety of adult human tissues. But in fact, it's more nuanced than that because the cells have different functions. We talk about the cells having this secretory component. Now, I say we talk about it because we've all learned from our friend, Professor Caplan. And so if I go back and I think about the times that he was a mentor to me and so many others, during this very special period at Case Western, and as I've mentioned, he's been there 53 years, I can tell you that from the 1980s onward, there was a period where the following acts took place that really changed the face of regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy. So he started working with that embryonic limb bud, as I mentioned, and identified a variety of markers that allowed the scientific community to measure lineage progression, was able to identify these cells from a variety of tissues, not just periosteum and bone marrow, and then named this process the mesogenic process, and these cells were MSCs, or mesenchymal stem cells, at the time. There were patents that were issued. There was a company that created and led to this new era of regenerative medicine. And one of the most important distinctions that then took place was the transition to allotherapy instead of using autologous therapy. And so on the heels of all of this, as many of you know, MSCs became the subject of research in laboratories literally around the world. And that is when all of this new information came to light and actually caused Arnold to re-examine his initial hypothesis. And in so doing, he decided to call these cells medicinal signaling cells, which of course allowed him to keep the acronym MSC. These are something he referred to as medicinal signaling cells. And in a very uncharacteristic move, he actually admits to being wrong. And now he says, and he urges and begs all of us not to call them stem cells, not to call the MSCs mesenchymal stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells. Don't call them stem cells because they really don't behave as stem cells in the body. And all of this has led to this tremendous explosion of clinical research, now captured in over 1,400 trials that are listed, some of which are completed, some of which are still ongoing, registered online at clinicaltrials.gov. So you can read about all of these studies ranging from orthopedic tissue repair to graft versus host disease to management of degenerative diseases, as well as COVID-19. these cells have an extraordinary potential to influence human health going forward. And this is one of the key tenets of why we all should recognize Arnold as being the leader that he is and deserving of the Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, I do have some numerics that I'd like to share with you about Arnold's accomplishments. And decreasing in a decreasing number set, we start with $35 million, which is an approximation of the number of grant dollars that he's received from the federal government to support his work over the last near 50 years. He has 63,706 citations as of today on Google Scholar with a very high H index and 530 peer-reviewed publications. I can't keep track. That's continuing to grow. As Bernie said, perhaps the greatest impact is the number of grad students, postdocs, and others fellows that were trained from around the world that have come to his laboratory, that have trained in his laboratory and gone on to themselves having tremendous careers as academicians, as investigators, as clinicians, as deanery, or in industry. This is really the biggest testament to Arnold's leadership, in my humble opinion. As I said, he's been in the same office, and has been in case for 53 years, but in the same office in the Millis Science Center, which ironically has the same acronym, MSC, for 50 years. He has 24 issued and pending patents, and this will be either the 16th or 17th significant or lifetime achievement award that he's received. Now, on a more personal note, because all of this is supported by our families and our friends, he has 8 direct lineage descendants with at least 25 and as much as 50% of his DNA. He's founded one company, Osiris Therapeutics, taken that public and sold it for $600 million. And lastly, the ranking of that mesenchymal stem cell paper from 1990 is the highest ranking paper in the orthopedic basic science literature since 1970. It's referenced at every orthopedic meeting that we go to. So as I sum up, I have this photo from Arnold from 12 years ago. Here he's beginning to talk about how MSCs should no longer be called mesenchymal stem cells. They should be medicinal signaling cells. You can see that. Lo, you think that he could name everything in MSC. It turns out that at 80 years old, and forgive me, Arnold, but everybody knows you're still young at heart, he is traveling the globe, talking about his science, talking about other people's science, learning and teaching. But I think that what's going to happen is we're going to see, and this is for real, we're going to see him take his show on the road. This is a very prominent cruise company called MSC Cruises. I don't know that they actually know Professor Caplan, but I think we'd love to see him take this show on, not exactly on the road, but on the water. So please join me in congratulating my dear friend, my scientific father, my mentor, and esteemed professor, Arnold Caplan. Arnold, congratulations. We love you, we honor you, and we respect you. Thank you so much for all that you have done, and we are here to say Godspeed and keep going. Thank you very much.
I am hugely honored to be given this Lifetime Achievement Award by the World Stem Cell Summit, and I want to thank my good friend Bernie and his committee for bestowing this honor upon me, and of course a special shout out thanks to Scott Bruder for this comprehensive and detailed review of my career and accomplishments. Scott, I not only love you for your compulsiveness, but for the fact that you've known me for so many years. I think the key elements of this long career beside perseverance is that I love what I do. I love the process of discovery, and I love the process of dissemination, of teaching this new information, and to watch the incredible progression of science, not only in my field, but in other fields, that allows our civilization to progress and the level of sophistication of healthcare to be improved. To have my basic science technology translate into real clinical protocols is one of the best prizes I've ever had bestowed upon me. And I think for every basic scientist to have your bench work, to have your thought processes culminate in real clinical protocols that help people and help deliver health care, can't get much better than that. The World Stem Cell Summit was founded on the concept of watching the development of science and how it progressed and translated into clinical protocols. And Bernie and his crew and the focus on patient advocacy, truly spectacular. So again, I'm just honored beyond words by this award. I'm honored by my long association with the World Stem Cell Summit and with all of my wonderful friends and colleagues in the regenerative medicine field. I'm just humbled beyond words to accept this award, and thank you very much for this distinction.